My daughter took my villa and gave it to her husband's family. She said, "This is theirs now, you are not allowed to come." I smiled and nodded. When they arrived to move in, I prepared a surprise for them that they would never forget. I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Madeline Johnson, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. My daughter Emma's voice was different, cold in a way that made my coffee taste bitter. "Mom, we've decided the beach house belongs to David's parents now. They need it more than you do." I set down my cup carefully, watching the steam rise like my temper. "Emma, honey, what do you mean?" But she'd already made up her mind. "Don't come this weekend. It's their house now." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then smiled the kind of smile that comes before lightning strikes. They had no idea what they just started. I drove to Sunset Beach Villa anyway, my hand steady on the wheel. The ocean stretched endlessly beside the coastal road, just like it had when Emma was little and we'd count seagulls together. But today felt different. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw them. David lounging on my porch swing. His parents Helen and Frank unpacking boxes like they owned the place. Emma stood beside them, directing traffic with the confidence of someone who thought she held all the cards. "Mom!" Emma called out, not moving from her spot. "I told you not to come." Helen, a woman with silver hair and an expression like she tasted something sour, looked me up and down. "We're so grateful for your generosity, Margaret," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I walked up the shell-lined path slowly, taking in every detail. Frank had already moved my grandmother's rocking chair to make room for their ugly green couch. Through the window, I could see Helen rearranging my kitchen, the same kitchen where Emma and I had baked cookies every Christmas. "Since when?" I asked quietly. "Do people move into someone else's home without asking?" Emma's cheeks flushed pink. "Mom, you're being dramatic. They lost their apartment. You have this big place all to yourself. It's selfish to keep it empty." Empty. I'd been here last month, replanting the garden. The month before I'd fixed the loose shutter. But apparently, none of that mattered to my own daughter. David finally spoke up, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "Margaret, we really appreciate you sharing. We'll take good care of everything." I looked at each of them in turn. Helen clutched a wine glass. My wine glass, filled with wine from my collection. Frank had already claimed my late husband's favorite reading chair. Emma stood there like she was doing me some kind of favor. "I see you've made yourselves comfortable," I said evenly. "In MY house. With my things. Without MY permission." Emma rolled her eyes. "Mom, Dad's been gone 3 years. You need to learn to share." The word share hit me like a slap. Robert and I had built this place with our own hands, board by board, dream by dream. I took a step closer to the porch. "Emma, I'd like to come inside my own home." "Not today, Mom," she replied, crossing her arms. "We're having a family dinner. You just make things awkward." "Family dinner? In my house? Without me?" Helen chimed in helpfully. "Perhaps it's time to let the younger generation take charge." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, but something sharper, more focused. "I see," I said simply. "Well then, enjoy your evening." I turned and walked back to my car, hearing their relieved laughter behind me. They thought they'd won. Poor things had no idea the game hadn't even started yet. The drive home to the city took 2 hours. But I didn't hear the radio or notice the traffic. My mind was already working, already planning. Emma thought she could just take what was mine, give it away like some unwanted furniture. I pulled into my driveway as the sun set, painting the sky the color of determination. Inside my apartment I made tea the good china because tonight was special. Tonight was when I stopped being the pushover mother and became something else entirely. I opened my laptop and started typing. There were calls to make, favors to collect, and a very important lesson to teach. The first call went to my friend Patricia, who worked in property management. "Patty, I need to make some changes to my beach house. Emergency maintenance issues." The second call was to my nephew Jake, who ran a tech company. "Jake, remember how you always said I should upgrade the house to be smart? I want everything. Cameras, sensors, automated systems. And I want it done by Friday." The third call was to my lawyer, Sandra Mills. "Sandra, I need to protect my property. Immediately." By midnight, I had the framework of a plan that would make David's family never want to see my beach house again. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Perfect weather for what I had planned. Jake's tech team arrived at Sunset Beach Villa at 8 a.m. sharp. I watched from my car as they unloaded equipment. Tiny cameras, motion sensors, smart locks, and boxes I didn't even recognize. Emma and her unwelcome guests had gone to town for supplies, leaving the house empty. Perfect timing. "Mrs. Thompson," Jake said, showing me his tablet, "we can install everything while they're gone. Motion detectors in every room, automated lighting, sound systems, even smart appliances. You'll control it all from your phone." I smiled for the first time in days. Make it memorable. The installation took 6 hours. Hidden cameras went behind picture frames. Motion sensors disguised as air fresheners were placed in every doorway. Smart speakers, invisible to the naked eye, were tucked into light fixtures and behind furniture. The piece de resistance was the smart home system. Everything could be controlled remotely from my phone. Temperature, lights, sounds, even the plumbing. Jake grinned as he showed me the app. "You can make this place do anything you want. Lights can flash, speakers can play sounds, you can even make the temperature swing wildly. It's like giving the house a personality." Oh, it would have a personality, all right. A very young one. That evening, I sat in my city apartment with the villa's camera feeds open on my laptop. The house looked peaceful, innocent even. You'd never guess it was now wired like a movie set. At 7:30, headlights swept across the driveway. Emma's car pulled up, followed by David's parents in their rusty sedan. They unloaded groceries and wine, laughing about something. Helen pointed at the house like she was showing off her new home. "Let's see how long that lasts," I murmured, my finger hovering over the app. "But not yet. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they'd gotten away with stealing from me." I watched them through the cameras as they settled in for the evening. Frank had found my husband's whiskey collection and was helping himself generously. Helen was cooking in my kitchen, using my pots and pans like she'd bought them herself. David and Emma cuddled on the couch, talking about their bright future in their new free house. At 9:45 p.m., when they were all relaxed and unsuspecting, I opened the app on my phone. My finger hovered over the button labeled System Activation. "This is for you, Robert," I whispered to my late husband's photo. "They won't forget this night." Press the button. The house came alive like something from a horror movie. Every light began flashing in a seizure-inducing strobe pattern. The smart speakers erupted with the sound of footsteps, loud footsteps running up and down the stairs, across the floors, through every room. The temperature shot up to 95 degrees, then plummeted to 55. Through the cameras, I watched them jump up in panic. "What's happening?" Emma screamed. Frank dropped his whiskey glass, the crystal shattering on the hardwood floors. Helen pressed herself against the kitchen counter as the lights above her flickered like lightning. "Is it an earthquake?" David yelled, though nothing was shaking except their nerves. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started. I activated the next phase. Every faucet in the house turned on at full blast. Water gushed from kitchen sinks, bathroom taps, the shower, even the outdoor hose. The sound was deafening, like a waterfall had appeared inside the house. Then came the voices. Pre-recorded messages I'd asked Jake to install, played through speakers they couldn't see. "Get out. This house is not yours. Leave now." The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the walls like angry ghosts. Through the cameras, I watched Frank stumble toward the front door, his face pale as moonlight. Emma was crying now, real tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom's house is haunted," she sobbed to David. Helen had dropped to her knees in the kitchen, water from the overflowing sink soaking her expensive dress. "We have to get out," she wailed. But the smart locks held firm. I'd programmed a 30-second delay, just long enough to let the fear really sink in. David yanked at the front door handle while the strobing lights turned his face into a frightening mask. "It won't open," he shouted over the chaos. Finally, the locks clicked open and they all burst out onto the porch like the house was on fire. They stumbled to their cars in blind panic, Frank falling once on the shell driveway. Helen was hyperventilating, gasping about evil spirits and curses. Emma kept looking back at the house like it might chase her. "We're never coming back," she screamed into the night air. David's hands shook as he tried to start his car. Within minutes, both cars were speeding away, their tail lights disappearing into the darkness. I sat back in my apartment chair and smiled. The house went quiet again, all systems automatically resetting. Just a peaceful beach house once more, as innocent as a sleeping baby. My phone rang at 6 a.m. the next morning. Emma's voice was shaky, exhausted. "Mom, something terrible happened at the house last night. We think it might be haunted." The lights went crazy, there was water everywhere, and we heard Dad's voice telling us to leave. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Oh my," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "How frightening. Maybe the house doesn't like strangers." "This isn't funny, Mom. Helen had to go to the hospital. She thought she was having a heart attack." I made sympathetic noises while privately thinking Helen was more dramatic than a soap opera star. "Emma, honey," I said gently, "maybe this is the universe's way of telling you something. That house has been in our family for 30 years. Your father and I built it with our own hands. Maybe it just knows when it's not being respected." Emma's voice got defensive. "We were going to take care of it. David's parents needed somewhere to live. Then they can find their own place," I replied firmly. "Like normal people do." There was silence on the line. Then Emma said something that chilled me more than any haunted house could. "We're not giving up, Mom. We'll figure out what went wrong and fix it. That house is ours now." Ours. I felt my blood pressure rise. After 30 years of marriage, after building that place board by board with Robert's calloused hands alongside mine, after the memories soaked into every beam and tile, she thought she could just claim it. "Emma," I said quietly, "that house will never be yours. Not the way you're trying to take it. You're getting old, Mom. You don't understand how families work anymore." Old. I was 62 and sharper than most people half my age. "I understand families perfectly," I said. "Real families don't steal from each other." I hung up before she could respond. That afternoon I made more calls. The first was to Sandra Mills, my lawyer. "Sandra, I need you to put together an airtight trust. Something that will protect my property from being taken by anyone, including family members." Sandra had been practicing law for 20 years and had seen every family drama imaginable. "Margaret, are you sure about this? Once we put the house in an irrevocable trust, even you won't be able to change your mind." "I'm absolutely sure," I said. "My daughter thinks she can steal from me. I'm going to teach her that actions have consequences." The second call went to the Sunrise Senior Center, where I'd volunteered for years. They'd been trying to buy property for a retreat center, somewhere seniors could go for respite care and activities. "Martha," I said to the director, "remember how you've been looking for a place by the ocean? I might have something for you." By evening, the paperwork was already being drawn up. The Sunset Beach Villa would become the Margaret and Robert Thompson Senior Retreat Center. Emma could never touch it again. The irony was perfect. She'd called me old. Fine. I'd give it to people who understood the value of age and wisdom. Saturday morning brought storm clouds and my first real test. Emma called again, her voice different this time, harder, more determined. Mom, we've hired an electrician and a plumber. We're going back to the house today to fix whatever's wrong with it. I almost laughed. Emma, what if it's not something that can be fixed? Don't be ridiculous. Houses don't just go crazy by themselves. There's a logical explanation, and we're going to find it. And if you don't, yes, then we'll call ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, whoever it takes. That house is going to be ours, Mom. David's parents have nowhere else to go. I hung up and immediately called Jake. They're coming back today with repair people. Can you add some new features to the system? Jake laughed. Aunt Margaret, you're evil. I love it. What did you have in mind? I want the house to seem like it's fighting back against being fixed. Every time they try to repair something, I want something else to go wrong. Make it seem like the house is protecting itself. Consider it done, Jake said. I'll add some fun surprises to the system. They won't know what hit them. Through the cameras, I watched them arrive at 2 p.m. Emma led the way, followed by David, his parents, and 2 bewildered-looking repair men. They approached the house like soldiers approaching enemy territory. The electrician went straight to the fuse box while the plumber headed for the kitchen sink. I waited until they were deep in their work, tools scattered everywhere, confidence building. Then I activated phase 2. The moment the electrician touched a wire, every smoke detector in the house began screaming. The plumber had just fixed the kitchen faucet when the bathroom shower exploded with hot water, steam billowing into the hallway. The repair men looked at each other with growing alarm. Ma'am, the electrician said to Emma, I've never seen wiring behave like this. It's like the house is fighting me. The plumber nodded grimly. Same here. Every time I fix one thing, something else breaks. And these aren't normal malfunctions. Helen clutched Frank's arm. It's the spirits. They don't want us here. Frank, trying to maintain his masculine dignity, scoffed. Spirits don't exist. This is just old wiring and bad plumbing. But even as he spoke, the lights began their strobing dance again, and his voice trembled with uncertainty. The final straw came when I activated the newest feature Jake had installed, the smart sprinkler system. Water erupted from every corner of the house, not just the faucets now, but from hidden nozzles in the walls, the ceiling, even the baseboards. It was like being inside a car wash, but worse because there was nowhere to run. The repair men grabbed their tools and fled, shouting something about not being paid enough for this madness. Emma, soaking wet and shivering, finally broke down completely. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed. The house hates us. That evening my phone stayed quiet. No angry calls, no demands, no threats. Just blissful silence. I used the time to finalize the trust paperwork with Sandra. It's done, she said. As of tomorrow, the Sunset Beach Villa will officially belong to the Sunrise Senior Center. Your daughter can't contest it, can't fight it, can't even touch it. The property is completely protected. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Robert would have been proud. We'd built something beautiful, and now it would help people instead of being stolen by ungrateful children. Sunday brought sunshine and the sound of my doorbell. I opened it to find Emma standing there, no longer the confident young woman who thought she could take whatever she wanted. Her hair was limp, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Mom, she said quietly, we give up. We can't. We can't fight a haunted house. I invited her in for tea, the same way I had when she was little and had scraped her knee. But this time the wound was deeper, her pride. Emma, I said gently, houses aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by disrespect. She looked at me with confusion. What do you mean? I set down my teacup and looked my daughter in the eyes. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. That house was built by your father and me. Every board, every nail, every room was made with love. When you tried to just give it away to strangers, you weren't just taking my property. You were taking my memories, my marriage, my life's work. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I didn't I didn't think about it that way. No, I agreed sadly. You didn't think at all. Mom, I'm sorry, Emma whispered. David's parents were desperate and I thought you'd understand. You always understood before. I reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand I'd held when teaching her to write her name. Emma, understanding doesn't mean letting people walk all over me. Your father and I taught you to be kind, not to be a doormat. There's a big difference. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstanding settling between us like dust in afternoon sunlight. Finally, Emma asked the question I'd been waiting for. What happens now? I pulled out the trust documents Sandra had prepared. Now the house goes to people who will appreciate it. The Sunrise Senior Center is going to turn it into a retreat for elderly people who need respite care. Your father would have loved that idea. Emma stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You're giving it to strangers. I'm giving it to people who understand the value of what they're receiving, I corrected. People who won't try to kick the owner off their own porch. Emma flinched at the memory. But some lessons should hurt a little. What about David's parents? Emma asked quietly. What about them? They're adults, Emma. Adults find their own housing. They don't expect their children to steal it from other people. Emma's voice got smaller. They're going to hate me. I felt a moment of sympathy for my daughter, remembering how hard it was to disappoint people you love. But sometimes disappointment is the price of doing what's right. Emma, you can't build your happiness on someone else's unhappiness. That's not love, that's selfishness. She nodded slowly, finally beginning to understand what she'd really done. The official transfer ceremony took place on a beautiful Thursday morning. Martha from the Sunrise Senior Center stood on the porch where Frank had once lounged with stolen whiskey, reading a speech about community and caring for our elders. Local news cameras captured the ribbon cutting, and I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. The house looked happy somehow, like it knew it was finally going to fulfill its true purpose. Emma came to the ceremony, standing quietly in the back, watching her inheritance become something beautiful instead of something taken. After the cameras left and the crowd dispersed, Emma approached me hesitantly. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. How did you do it? Make the house go crazy like that? I looked at my daughter, my smart, beautiful daughter who had tried to steal from her own mother, and made a decision. Emma, some things in life are magic. Real magic happens when people stand up for what's right, when they refuse to let others take advantage of their kindness. That house was protecting itself the only way it knew how. She studied my face, probably looking for signs of deception, but found only truth. Are you ever going to forgive me? Emma asked, and I heard the little girl she used to be hiding in those words. I already have, I said, surprising both of us. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Emma. And it doesn't mean you can do it again. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know. I'm going to do better, Mom. I'm going to be better. I pulled her into a hug, the same way I had when she was small and the world seemed too big and scary. I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will. 6 months later, I received an invitation that made my heart sing. The Sunset Beach Villa was hosting its first annual Senior Appreciation Day, and they wanted me to be the guest of honor. I dressed in my best blue dress, the one Robert always said brought out my eyes, and drove to the coast with my windows down and my spirits high. The house had been beautifully maintained, with wheelchair ramps added to the porch and a garden full of flowers that seniors could tend without bending over. It looked like the house was smiling. Martha met me at the door with a warm hug. Margaret, you can't imagine what this place has meant to our community. We've had over 200 seniors use the facility for respite care, art classes, and social events. 3 couples have gotten engaged here. I laughed, thinking about Robert and how he'd always joked that our house was magical. Maybe he'd been right all along. Inside, elderly people were painting watercolors, playing card games, and sharing stories on the porch where Frank had once planned to live rent-free. The house hummed with life and purpose. As I walked through the rooms I'd once protected so fiercely, I felt Robert's presence stronger than ever. In the kitchen where Helen had once rearranged my things, seniors were learning to bake bread together. In the living room where David had lounged so smugly, elderly friends were reading books aloud to each other. The house had found its true calling, not as a trophy to be stolen, but as a place of healing and community. "This is perfect," I whispered to Robert's memory. "This is what we always wanted our home to be." The surprise came during the ceremony when Martha stood up to make an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some wonderful news. Thanks to the success of our program here, we've been approved for a grant to purchase 3 more properties for senior centers. Our model is being copied in 5 other states." The applause was thunderous, and I felt tears of joy streaming down my cheeks. What had started as a lesson in boundaries had become something much larger, a movement to honor and care for our elderly citizens. That evening, as I prepared to drive home, Emma appeared in the driveway. She looked different, older somehow, but in a good way. More thoughtful. "Mom, I wanted to apologize again. And to thank you. Thank me. For teaching me that some things are more important than getting what you want. For showing me what real strength looks like." She gestured toward the house, where a group of seniors were watching the sunset from the porch. "This is so much better than what I had planned." I squeezed her hand. Sometimes we don't know what we really need until someone shows us. "What happened to David's parents?" asked, genuinely curious. Emma sighed. "They found a nice apartment near downtown. Helen started volunteering at a food bank, and Frank got a part-time job at a bookstore. Turns out they didn't actually need a free house. They needed purpose." I nodded, unsurprised. Most people who demand handouts aren't really looking for things. They're looking for meaning. And David, he's different now. More respectful. I think seeing what happened to his parents when they tried to take from you opened his eyes. We're in counseling together, learning about boundaries and respect. As we stood there in the fading light, watching seniors enjoy the house that had once been at the center of our family drama, I realized something important. The real victory hadn't been scaring away the people who tried to steal from me. It had been turning something beautiful into something even more beautiful. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who needed it, and that was exactly as it should be. "Mom," Emma said softly, "I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." The drive home was peaceful, the ocean keeping me company as the stars began to appear. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Aunt Margaret saw the news story about the senior center. You're famous. Also, I kept all the smart home equipment we installed. Want me to set up your apartment the same way? You know, just in case someone tries to steal your coffee maker." I laughed out loud, my voice echoing in the empty car. Maybe I would take him up on that offer. A woman could never be too prepared after all. Back in my city apartment, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the lights of the city. The phone rang. A familiar number I hadn't seen in months. "Hello, Helen," I said calmly. "Margaret." Helen's voice was different now, smaller somehow. "I wanted to apologize for what we tried to do. It was wrong." "Yes," I agreed simply, "it was. The senior center. It's a beautiful thing you did. Frank and I have been volunteering there once a week. People are so grateful. They make us feel useful again." "Helen," I said gently, "that's what happens when you give instead of take. The world gives back to you." There was silence on the line, then the sound of muffled crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We were just so scared, so desperate. We thought the world owed us something because we'd lost our home." "The world doesn't owe us anything," I replied. "But when we earn what we get, when we contribute instead of just taking, amazing things happen." Helen thanked me before hanging up, and I felt the last piece of anger leave my heart. 1 year later, I received the most surprising invitation of all. To Emma and David's wedding renewal ceremony. They'd been married for 3 years, But Emma wrote that they wanted to start over, to make vows based on who they'd become instead of who they used to be. The ceremony was held at the Sunset Beach Villa, with seniors from the center serving as honorary grandparents to the bride and groom. As I watched my daughter promise to honor and respect not just her husband, but all the people in their lives, I felt Robert's presence stronger than ever. The reception was magical. Seniors danced with young people, stories were shared across generations, and the house seemed to pulse with joy. Martha pulled me aside during the dancing. "Margaret, I have something to tell you. The state wants to make our program the model for senior care across the country. They're offering us funding to train other communities. Your house is going to help thousands of elderly people." I felt my heart swell with pride. "Robert would be so happy," I whispered. "His house is finally fulfilling its destiny." As the evening wound down, Emma found me sitting on the porch swing where this whole adventure had begun. "Mom, I have something for you." She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver locket with 2 pictures, one of Robert and me on our wedding day, and one of the senior center on opening day. "So you can carry both of your greatest loves with you," Emma explained. I clasped the locket around my neck, feeling the weight of memory and hope combined. "This is perfect, sweetheart." "Thank you, Mom," Emma said, settling beside me on the swing. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Always, sweetheart. How did you really make the house do all those crazy things?" "I know it wasn't ghosts." I smiled, looking out at the ocean where the moon painted a silver path across the waves. "Emma, the house was never haunted by spirits. It was haunted by love. Your father and I built this place with so much love that it couldn't stand to see that love disrespected. Call it magic, call it technology, call it whatever you want. But never underestimate the power of defending what you love." Emma laughed, the sound carrying across the water like music. "You're never going to tell me the truth, are you?" "I just did," I replied. "Love is the truth, Emma. Everything else is just details." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the waves and the distant sound of seniors inside sharing stories and laughter. The house had found its purpose, my daughter had learned her lesson, and the family drama that had once threatened to tear us apart had instead brought us closer together. Sometimes the best magic is simply learning when to fight and when to forgive. As I drove home that night, I thought about all the lessons this experience had taught me. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you mean. It makes you strong. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about respect, love, and treating each other with dignity. And sometimes the best way to keep something you love is to give it to people who will love it even more than you do. The Sunset Beach Villa was no longer mine, but it was safe, it was loved, and it was serving a purpose that would have made Robert proud. The story could have ended there, but life has a way of adding unexpected chapters. 2 years later, I received a call that changed everything again. It was Martha from the senior center. "Margaret, you're not going to believe this. The state has approved funding for a national program based on our model. They want to name it the Thompson Initiative after you and Robert. Senior retreat centers in every state, all inspired by what you started here." I sat down hard, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had grown from one moment of standing up for myself. "There's more," Martha continued excitedly. "They want you to be the national spokesperson. Travel the country, help other communities set up their centers, share your story about the importance of respecting our elders." I thought about Robert, about how he'd always said I had a gift for bringing people together. "Martha," I said slowly, "I think that sounds like exactly what I'm supposed to do." And so began the next chapter of my life, not as a victim of family theft, but as a champion for seniors everywhere. The first speaking engagement was in Portland, Oregon. I stood before an audience of 300 community leaders, city officials, and family members dealing with elder care issues. My hands shook slightly as I began. 2 years ago, my daughter tried to give my house to strangers. Today, that house serves hundreds of seniors, and I'm here to tell you that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the greatest challenges. The applause was immediate and thunderous. I knew I'd found my calling. Over the next 6 months, I traveled to 12 states, sharing the story of the Sunset Beach Villa and helping communities develop their own senior retreat programs. In Texas, I met a woman whose son had sold her farm without permission. We helped her start a therapeutic garden program for Alzheimer's patients. In Michigan, a grandfather whose family had abandoned him became the head of a senior mentorship program. Each story reminded me that standing up for yourself can create ripples that change the world. The most moving moment came in Iowa, where I met elderly twins named Rose and Ruby. They'd been forced out of their family home by greedy relatives and were living in a cramped apartment, barely surviving on Social Security. "Mrs. Thompson," Rose said with tears in her eyes, "hearing your story gave us hope. We thought we were powerless, but you showed us that age doesn't make us weak. It makes us wise." 6 months later, they'd started a successful quilting cooperative that employed 20 seniors and brought in enough money for them to rent a proper house. Emma joined me on several speaking tours, sharing her perspective as the daughter who had learned about respect and boundaries the hard way. "I thought I was helping people," she'd tell audiences, "but I was really just taking from my mother what I thought she wouldn't miss. The truth is, we never know what something means to someone until we try to take it away." Her honesty about her mistakes made our message even more powerful. Families can heal, but only when everyone takes responsibility for their actions. The Thompson Initiative officially launched on a crisp October morning, exactly 3 years after that first devastating phone call from Emma. The ceremony was held at our original villa, now bustling with activity as seniors from across the region gathered for the celebration. I cut the ribbon alongside the Secretary of Health and Human Services, while cameras rolled and reporters scribbled notes. "Today," I announced to the crowd, "we celebrate not just a program, but a promise that our elders deserve respect, dignity, and homes where they feel valued." The statistics were staggering. In just 3 years, the Thompson Initiative had helped establish 47 senior retreat centers across 23 states. Over 12,000 elderly Americans had received respite care, social services, and community support. Families had reconciled, seniors had found purpose, and communities had discovered the value of intergenerational cooperation. What had started as one woman's refusal to be bullied had become a national movement for elder rights and family healing. That evening, as the celebration wound down, I found myself alone on the beach behind the villa. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded me of the evening this all began. I felt a presence beside me and turned to see a familiar figure, an elderly man in his 70s, walking slowly across the sand. "Excuse me," he called out. "Aren't you Margaret Thompson?" I nodded, wondering if he needed directions. "I'm Harold Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "My daughter tried to put me in a nursing home against my will last year." Harold's story was painfully familiar. His daughter, convinced she knew what was best, had tried to sell his house and force him into institutional care. "But then I heard about your story," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "I learned that I didn't have to just accept what other people decided for me. I stood up for myself, got legal help, and kept my independence. Now my daughter and I have a better relationship because I taught her to respect my choices." He gestured toward the villa. "This place saved my life, even though I've never set foot in it before tonight." As Harold walked away, rejoining his family on the beach, I realized the true magnitude of what had happened. The villa hadn't just been saved from theft. It had become a symbol of something much larger. It represented the idea that people, regardless of age, have the right to make their own decisions about their lives and property. It stood for the principle that families should support each other, not exploit each other. And it proved that sometimes the best way to help people is to first help yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Aunt Margaret, just saw you on the national news again. You're more famous than most movie stars. Also, I've been thinking, wanna write a book about all this? I think the world needs to hear the whole story." I smiled, looking out at the ocean where Robert and I had once dreamed of growing old together. Maybe it was time to share not just the victory but the journey, the fear, the anger, the moment of decision when I chose to fight back instead of giving in. The book took 8 months to write, with Emma helping me organize my thoughts and memories. We called it Standing on Sacred Ground. How one house taught a family about love, loss, and learning to fight back. The publisher was amazed by the response. Pre-orders broke records, and we scheduled a 20-city book tour before it even hit the shelves. "Mom," Emma said as we reviewed the final manuscript, "you've turned our family drama into something that's going to help thousands of people. Dad would be so proud." The book launch was held at the Sunset Beach Villa, naturally. Hundreds of people gathered on the beach as I read the opening chapter aloud. This is the story of a house that refused to be stolen, a family that learned to heal, and a woman who discovered that standing up for yourself is the greatest gift you can give to everyone you love. The applause echoed across the water, and I felt Robert's spirit in every wave that touched the shore. Our house had become so much more than we'd ever dreamed. During the Q&A session, a young woman raised her hand. "Mrs. Thompson, what would you say to people who think you were too harsh on your daughter? Some people say family should forgive everything." I considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting disrespect," I replied. I forgave Emma completely, but I also taught her that actions have consequences. The kindest thing I could do for her was to show her that taking from people, even family, is wrong. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. Another hand went up, an elderly gentleman in the back. "What advice do you have for seniors who feel powerless against younger family members who want to control their lives?" I smiled, remembering my own moment of feeling helpless on that porch 3 years ago. "Remember that age brings wisdom, not weakness," I said firmly. "You've lived longer, learned more, and earned the right to make your own decisions. Don't let anyone convince you that getting older means giving up your power. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach people to respect your boundaries." The book became a bestseller within 3 weeks, climbing to #1 on multiple lists. More importantly, it sparked conversations in families across the country about respect, boundaries, and the rights of elderly parents. Support groups formed, legal aid societies reported increased calls from seniors, and adult children began examining their own assumptions about what their parents should do with their property and lives. The ripple effect was extraordinary. 6 months after the book's release, I received an invitation that brought tears to my eyes. The White House wanted to host a reception honoring outstanding Americans who had made significant contributions to elder care. I would be one of 12 people recognized by the president himself. As I stood in the Rose Garden, shaking hands with the leader of the free world, I thought about that moment when Emma first told me the house wasn't mine anymore. If someone had told me then that her betrayal would lead to this moment, I never would have believed them. "Mrs. Thompson," the president said as cameras flashed around us, "your work has transformed how America thinks about aging and family relationships. You've shown us that respect isn't something that expires when we get older. It's something that should grow stronger with each passing year." The speech he gave about the Thompson Initiative brought the entire audience to their feet. Later, as I walked through the halls of the White House, I whispered to Robert's memory, "Can you believe this, honey? Our little beach house started all of this." The most unexpected development came a year later when David's parents, Helen and Frank, asked to meet with me. I agreed, curious about what they wanted to say. We met at a small cafe near the senior center, and I was struck by how different they looked, healthier, more confident, more at peace. "Margaret," Helen began nervously, "we wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, surprised. "For teaching us something we desperately needed to learn." Frank leaned forward, his eyes sincere in a way I'd never seen before. "When we tried to take your house, we thought we were victims of circumstance. But you showed us that we were actually victims of our own entitlement. We thought the world owed us something because we'd fallen on hard times." Helen nodded tearfully. "Since then we've completely changed our lives. Frank got a job at the hardware store, I started a small catering business, and we volunteer at the senior center twice a week. We've never been happier or more fulfilled. The strangest thing," Helen continued, "is that when we started earning our way instead of looking for handouts, opportunities appeared everywhere. People respect us now in a way they never did when we were just taking." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's the secret nobody talks about, I said gently. When you give to the world instead of demanding from it, the world gives back in ways you never expected. You too have found your purpose. As our conversation wound down, Frank asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you think Emma will ever forgive us for what we tried to do? I smiled, thinking of my daughter and how much she'd grown. Frank, Emma forgave you a long time ago. But more importantly, you've forgiven yourselves by becoming better people. That's the only apology that really matters. The one you make with your actions, not your words. The 5th anniversary of the Thompson Initiative was celebrated with events in all 50 states. I was asked to give the keynote address at the main ceremony in Washington, D.C., where over 2,000 people gathered to celebrate the program's impact. The statistics were mind-boggling. The initiative had now helped establish 127 senior retreat centers, served over 45,000 elderly Americans, and facilitated the reconciliation of hundreds of fractured families. What had started as one woman's refusal to be victimized had become a national movement for dignity and respect. During my speech, I looked out at the sea of faces. Seniors who had found new purpose, adult children who had learned to respect their parents, and families who had healed from years of misunderstanding and conflict. 5 years ago, I told them. My daughter called me on a Tuesday morning and told me my house no longer belonged to me. Today, that house belongs to all of us. To every person who believes that age brings wisdom, not weakness, and that respect is not something we outgrow. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. But what moved me most were the individual conversations afterward. A woman from Oregon told me how she'd used my book to find the courage to leave an abusive adult son's home and reclaim her independence. A man from Florida shared that reading about Emma's transformation had inspired him to reconcile with his own mother after years of taking her for granted. Each story reminded me that personal healing can become universal healing when we have the courage to share our truth. That evening, Emma and I had dinner alone for the first time in years. No cameras, no interviews, no public events. Just a mother and daughter talking over Chinese takeout in my hotel room. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant." The news took my breath away. After everything we'd been through, after all the lessons about family and respect and boundaries, I was going to be a grandmother. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "That's wonderful news. I want to raise this baby differently," Emma continued, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I want to teach them about respect and earning what you get and the importance of family boundaries. I want them to know the story of their grandmother who stood up for what was right, even when it was hard." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma, you're going to be an amazing mother. And this baby is going to grow up understanding something a lot of children don't. That love and respect go together." 9 months later, I held my granddaughter Sarah for the first time in the living room of the Sunset Beach villa. Emma had specifically requested that the baby be born near the house that had taught our family so much about love, loss, and redemption. As I rocked tiny Sarah in the same chair where Helen had once sat with stolen wine, I whispered stories about her grandfather Robert and the house he'd built with love. "This place is part of your story now," I told her softly. "Remember that when you grow up, some things are worth fighting for." The Thompson Initiative continued to grow, but my role began to shift from spokesperson to grandmother. I still gave occasional speeches and interviews, but my primary focus became teaching Sarah about family history, respect, and the importance of standing up for what's right. On her first birthday, we held the party at the senior center, where she crawled happily among the elderly residents who'd found new life thanks to the program her great-grandfather's house had inspired. As Sarah grew from toddler to preschooler, she became the unofficial mascot of the Thompson Initiative. Her visits to various senior centers brought joy to residents and reminded everyone why intergenerational connections were so important. "Granny Maggie," she'd say in her tiny voice, "tell me about the magic house again." And I'd tell her the story, not of ghosts or technology, but of a woman who learned that sometimes the greatest magic is simply refusing to let others take what belongs to you. On Sarah's 5th birthday, Emma made an announcement that surprised everyone. She and David were donating a significant portion of their savings to establish a new Thompson Initiative center in their own city. We want Sarah to grow up understanding that the best way to honor family is to help other families, Emma explained. The center would specialize in programs that brought together seniors and young children, creating the kind of bonds that prevent family conflicts before they start. The 10th anniversary celebration of the Thompson initiative was held, appropriately, at the original Sunset Beach villa. As I walked through the house that had started it all, I marveled at how it had evolved. The living room where David once lounged now hosted art therapy sessions. The kitchen where Helen had tried to make herself at home now served meals to seniors who might otherwise eat alone. The porch where I'd been told I wasn't welcome now welcomed hundreds of people who needed to feel valued and loved. During the ceremony, Martha announced the program's most impressive milestone yet. The Thompson initiative had now influenced policy in all 50 states, with federal legislation pending to provide funding for senior retreat centers nationwide. What started as one woman's refusal to be disrespected, she told the crowd, has become America's most successful model for elder care and family reconciliation. I thought of Robert, of how he'd always said that standing up for what's right creates circles that never stop expanding. That evening, as 3 generations of our family gathered on the beach behind the villa, I realized how completely our story had transformed. Emma, now a confident mother and respected advocate for senior rights. David, who had learned that respect isn't given but earned through consistent actions. Little Sarah, growing up with an understanding of family dynamics that many adults never achieve. And me, no longer the woman who smiled and nodded when people tried to take from her, but someone who had learned the power of standing firm with love. Granny Maggie, Sarah said as we watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Someday will I help old people like you do? I pulled her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair and the salt air that had witnessed so much of our family's journey. Sweetheart, you're already helping old people just by being here, by showing them that young and old can be friends. But yes, I hope you'll carry on this work when you're older. Someone needs to make sure families remember how to respect each other. As the years passed, I gradually stepped back from public speaking, content to watch the Thompson initiative flourish under younger leadership. Emma took over many of my responsibilities, bringing fresh energy and new ideas to the program. But I remained involved in the most important way. As the keeper of the story, the living reminder of why the work mattered. At community events, I'd often be introduced simply as the woman who wouldn't give up her house. And that was perfectly fine with me. Sarah's 8th birthday brought an unexpected visitor. Jake, now in his 40s and running a successful smart home company, arrived with a special gift. Sarah, he said with a conspiratorial grin, your great-grandmother and I have a secret we've never told anyone about the magic house. Want to hear it? I started to protest, but Sarah's excited squeals convinced me it was time for the truth. Jake pulled out his tablet and showed her the control app we'd used years ago. Your Granny Maggie didn't use magic to scare away the bad people, Jake explained to Sarah's wide eyes. She used technology. Smart lights, hidden speakers, remote-controlled water systems. All designed to make the house seem haunted. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of awe and amusement. Granny, you tricked them. I protected what was mine, I corrected gently. Sometimes grown-ups need to learn lessons just like children do. The technology wasn't the real magic, sweetheart. The real magic was learning to stand up for myself. That revelation led to Sarah's new favorite game, designing elaborate protection systems for her toys and treasures. She'd set up complex arrangements of string and bells around her dollhouse, explaining seriously that bad people need to learn respect. Emma and I would exchange amused glances, recognizing the family trait of refusing to be pushed around, now passed down to a 3rd generation. Some lessons, it seemed, were truly timeless. The Thompson Initiative's 15th anniversary was marked by a documentary film about the program's impact on American families. The filmmaker interviewed dozens of people whose lives had been changed by the centers. Seniors who'd found new purpose, adult children who'd learned to respect their parents' autonomy, and families who'd healed from years of conflict and misunderstanding. But the most powerful moment came when they interviewed Emma and me together, mother and daughter reflecting on how a family crisis had become a national movement. The house taught us that boundaries aren't barriers, Emma told the camera, her voice steady and sure. They're foundations. When family members respect each other's boundaries, relationships become stronger, not weaker. I nodded, adding, people think that standing up for yourself means you don't love your family. But the truth is, if you don't respect yourself, you can't teach others to respect you either. Love without respect isn't love. It's just habit. The documentary won several awards and was shown in schools across the country as part of family studies curricula. Teachers reported that students were having more thoughtful conversations about family dynamics, elder care, and the importance of respecting people regardless of their age. Sarah, now 10, became something of a celebrity at her school when classmates learned her grandmother was the famous lady from the movie about the magic house. As I entered my 70s, I found myself reflecting more on the meaning of everything that had happened. The villa still stood, still served seniors, still rang with laughter and conversation from people who'd found community and purpose. The Thompson initiative had become larger than any of us had imagined, but its core message remained simple. Every person, regardless of age, deserves respect and dignity. Families work best when everyone's boundaries are honored. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to be taken advantage of. Sarah's middle school years brought new challenges and new wisdom. When she came home upset because a classmate was trying to copy her homework, I saw it as a teaching moment. "What do you think you should do?" I asked her. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "I could just let her copy it to avoid conflict. But that wouldn't really help her learn, would it? And it's not fair to me either." I smiled, recognizing the family gift for seeing situations clearly. "What would you tell her?" "I'd tell her I'll help her understand the work, but I won't do it for her." That conversation reminded me of something important. The lessons from the villa weren't just about property rights or family dynamics. They were about the fundamental human need to be treated with dignity and respect. Sarah was learning, just as Emma had learned, that saying no to unreasonable demands wasn't mean. It was necessary. It was the foundation of healthy relationships and strong communities. The 20th anniversary of the Thompson Initiative was celebrated with events in hundreds of cities across America. I was asked to give what everyone assumed would be my final major address about the program. Standing before an audience of 5,000 people in a convention center in Chicago, I felt the weight of 2 decades of change and growth. 20 years ago, I began. I was a widow trying to hold onto a house that represented my marriage and my memories. Today, that house has helped create a movement that serves over 100,000 seniors annually in all 50 states. But the real victory, I continued, isn't in the numbers or the programs or the awards. It's in the families who have learned to treat each other with respect. It's in the seniors who have reclaimed their dignity and their right to make their own choices. It's in the adult children who have discovered that honoring their parents doesn't mean controlling them. The house didn't teach us about ghosts or technology. It taught us about love that includes boundaries. The speech was interrupted by standing ovations 3 times, but the moment that moved me most came afterward. A young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm a social worker specializing in elder abuse. Your story and the programs you've created have given me the tools to help hundreds of families. But more than that, they've taught me how to have better relationships with my own aging parents. Thank you for showing us that respect doesn't have an expiration date." As I prepared to step back from public life, I made one final visit to the Sunset Beach Villa alone. It was a Tuesday morning, much like the morning Emma had first called to tell me the house was no longer mine. But now, instead of silence and solitude, I found the house alive with purpose. In the kitchen, seniors were preparing lunch for a community meal. In the living room, a grief counseling group met to support each other through loss. On the porch where I'd once been told I wasn't welcome, elderly friends played cards and shared stories. I walked down to the beach where Robert and I had once planned our retirement dreams. The sun was high, the water calm, and I could almost hear his voice on the wind. "Margaret, look what you built from our little house." I sat on the sand, no longer the angry woman who'd been pushed off her own porch, but someone who had learned that protecting what you love sometimes means giving it away to people who will love it even more. The house was no longer mine, but its legacy belonged to everyone it had touched. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, now 13 and full of teenage wisdom. "Granny Maggie, I'm writing an essay about family heroes for school. Can I interview you about how you saved our family by saving yourself?" I smiled, thinking about how the cycle continued. Each generation learning from the last, each person finding their own way to stand up for what's right. "Of course, sweetheart," I texted back. "But remember, the real heroes are the people who learn to change, not the person who made them change." That interview became the foundation for Sarah's high school valedictorian speech 4 years later. Standing at the podium in her graduation cap and gown, she told our family's story to her classmates and their parents. "My great-grandmother taught me that love isn't about saying yes to everything people ask for," she said, her young voice carrying across the auditorium. "Real love sometimes means saying a no. No to disrespect, no to being taken advantage of, no to letting people treat you badly. When we respect ourselves, we teach others how to respect us too." The audience gave Sarah a standing ovation, and I felt my heart swell with pride and completion. The little girl who had once asked about the magic house was now a young woman who understood the real magic, the power of self-respect, family healing, and standing up for what's right. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I knew the lessons of the Sunset Beach Villa would continue for another generation. Emma approached me after the ceremony, tears in her eyes. "Mom, Sarah's been accepted to law school. She wants to specialize in elder rights and family law. She says she wants to help other families learn what we learned." I hugged my daughter, thinking about how far we'd all come from that terrible Tuesday when she'd called to take my house away. "Emma," I said softly, "that's the most beautiful ending to our story I could imagine." But it wasn't the ending. It was another beginning. Sarah's legal career would eventually lead to landmark legislation protecting seniors' rights. Emma's advocacy work would expand the Thompson initiative to 12 other countries. And I, well into my 80s now, would become the beloved Granny Maggie, whose story reminded people that age brings wisdom, not weakness, and that families heal best when everyone learns to respect each other. The final chapter of this story takes place on Sarah's wedding day. She chose to hold the ceremony at the Sunset Beach Villa, the same porch where my journey of self-discovery had begun 30 years earlier. As I watched my granddaughter promise to love and honor her new husband, I felt Robert's presence stronger than ever. The house he'd built with such love had become something neither of us could have imagined. A symbol of dignity, respect, and the power of standing firm in love. During her wedding speech, Sarah raised her glass and looked directly at me. "To my Granny Maggie, who taught our family that the greatest gift you can give someone is teaching them to respect themselves and others. This house behind me has served thousands of people, but its greatest service was teaching a stubborn old woman that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let people take advantage of your kindness." As laughter and applause filled the air, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment, the phone call that had shattered my peace, the night I'd fought back with lights and sounds and determination, the years of healing and growth that followed. The house had never been haunted by ghosts, but it had been blessed by something even more powerful, the spirit of a woman who refused to be diminished by others' bad behavior. The Thompson initiative continues to this day, now serving over 200,000 seniors annually through 400-plus centers across the United States and beyond. Sarah leads the legal advocacy arm of the organization, fighting for seniors' rights in courts and legislatures. Emma runs the family reconciliation programs that help heal relationships damaged by misunderstanding and disrespect. And I, well into my 90s now, serve as the honorary chairwoman emeritus, still telling the story of how one woman's refusal to be victimized became a movement that changed the world. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret the way I handled Emma's betrayal. Wouldn't it have been easier to just give them the house? They wonder. But when I see the thousands of seniors who found dignity and purpose through our programs, when I watch families heal from years of conflict, when I hold my great-grandchildren and see them growing up with an understanding of respect and boundaries that many adults never achieve, I know that every difficult moment was worth it. The Sunset Beach Villa still stands, still serves, still welcomes people who need to feel valued and loved. But its greatest legacy isn't the programs or the services. It's the reminder that every person, regardless of age, has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. It's the proof that families work best when boundaries are honored and differences are resolved through communication rather than force. On quiet mornings, when I visit the villa and sit on the porch where this all began, I sometimes imagine I can hear Robert's voice on the ocean breeze. "Margaret, you took our little house and turned it into something that helps the whole world. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. You chose love with boundaries over peace without respect. And look what grew from that choice. The sun sets over Sunset Beach Villa every evening, just as it has for decades. But now it sets on a house that belongs to everyone who needs it. Not because it was stolen or given away, but because one woman learned that the greatest gift you can give to something you love is ensuring it serves its highest purpose. The house Robert and I built with our hands became a home that Emma and I rebuilt with our hearts. This is the story of a house that taught a family about love, loss, and learning to fight back. It's the story of boundaries that became bridges, of conflict that became healing, and of a woman who discovered that standing up for yourself is the greatest gift you can give to everyone you love. The villa may have started as mine and Robert's dream, but it became something much more beautiful, proof that sometimes the best way to keep what you love is to share it with people who will love it just as much. So when young people ask me about the magic that saved our house and healed our family, I tell them the truth. There was no magic except the decision to stop being afraid of other people's disapproval. There were no ghosts except the spirits of love and respect that every home should have. The only supernatural power was the very natural human right to be treated with dignity, regardless of age. And when they ask what they can do in their own lives, I give them the same advice I'd give anyone. Love with boundaries. Respect yourself and teach others to respect you. Stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Remember that saying no to unreasonable demands isn't mean. It's necessary. And never forget that the greatest gift you can give your family is showing them how healthy relationships really work. The story of the Sunset Beach Villa reminds us that every ending can become a beginning if we have the courage to stand up for what we believe in. It teaches us that families heal best when everyone learns to respect each other's boundaries. And it proves that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let people take you for granted. Thanks for watching Granny's Voice.